2020 will no doubt go down as one of the darkest and most challenging years in the history of the world. The COVID pandemic is quickly changing how we live, learn, and do business, and Jamaica has not been spared. The country has always been a major battleground, whether it was during the days of colonialism and European conquests, or during the turbulent 1970s and early 1980s, when the island was pulled into the Cold War as the two major political parties clashed over differences in political ideologies. On September 3, the people will again go to the polls. Christopher Charles is a professor of political and social psychology at the University of the West Indies.
Political psychology is the use of psychological science to explain and predict political behavior, political events, and more generally political outcomes.
Professor Charles has developed an election forecasting model, which he used to predict the likely winner of the upcoming election.
In the last 5 years, I've started to build models, election forecast model. In 2016, I used a US-based model. Since then, I've developed a local model that I'm going to use to forecast this general election. It's an indigenous model. So I do several things, but in terms of political psychology specifically, it's political behavior, political identity and political violence, and election forecasting. It is important to understand the psychology of our leaders because we need to understand who they are. What are they really like? Who is Peter Phillips? Who is Andrew Holness? Who is Christopher Tufton? Who is Julian Robinson? Who is Edward Seaga? Who is Michael Manley? So understanding them psychologically is very important, and we do this by measuring their personality from a distance. So no leader will allow us to come with a paper and pencil personality test to score their personality or to measure it. So political psychologists in the United States have developed computer programs to do this, and the one I use is called the Profiler software developed by Michael Young of Social Science Automation, where it codes the utterances of political leaders, because what we say as individuals reveal our psychological states. So we have tools from a distance, measures that we use to determine the personality, but personality by itself is useless. So we have to look at the political context and the situation that leaders find themselves in. So if we know their psychological characteristics and we understand the political context, the political culture, and we know the situation, we have some sense of what they will do and how they will behave and why they behave the way they do.
Professor Charles has assessed past leaders such as the PNP's Michael Manley and the JLP's Edward Seaga, the central figures during the political upheavals of the 1970s.
The two leaders were adversarial in this context, right? Competitive and adversarial. If Mr. Seaga said one thing, Michael said the opposite. If Michael said one thing, Mr. Seaga said the opposite. And it was like that throughout the 1970s, right up until 1980. It's just that when you compare them, Michael Manley had the gift of grace. He had a compelling personality with a social justice focus. Edward Seaga was a task-oriented authoritarian, meaning that he was a strong leader. And he was task-oriented. The two of them operated in a particular context that brought out certain things about them psychologically, because political competition, when it is intense, political psychologists like to say it brings out the darker side of the personality.
They work like communists, they think like communists, and they do the things that communists do. And as far as we are concerned, we know that they are a communist government.
The whole thing, the whole communist charge is really a trumped up thing that is used to try to justify and excuse violence and an attempt to sort of upset and confuse people.
Michael Manley was charismatic. Mr. Siaga, on the other hand, was relative to Michael Manley shy. Most people find it surprising, but he was. And because of the combative style that the situation brought out for both leaders, because the PNP was in power, and because of the PNP social policies and Michael's charisma, he connected more with the people. So he won the 1976 general election.
According to the political psychologist, the society still suffers from the effects of the tribal politics of the 1970s, even though they're not as intense as before.
We still have political tribalism, but we have had a significant reduction in political violence since 1980. Since 1980, we have had a significant reduction in political violence. The political parties have been a part of it. The media are vigilant, civil society, and the private sector, and international observers, and the church, and so on, and Jamaicans in general. So you will hear disturbances, but nothing like large-scale war and killings that occurred between 1972 and 1980.
Days before the polls, many Jamaicans are keenly assessing the leaders of both political parties. On one side, there is the PNP's Dr. Peter Phillips, a veteran politician who many credit as the finance minister who worked tirelessly to pull Jamaica out of a crippling recession and put it on a path for growth. On the other side, there is Andrew Holness, a younger prime minister who has steered a government that has increased employment, improved business confidence, and reduced interest rates, with many arguing that the economy has improved under his watch. Professor Charles has assessed the conceptual, technical, and people skills of both leaders.
So conceptual skill is the ability to bring disparate ideas together, to integrate them, to come up with new ideas, to put them together, to articulate them publicly, right? Technical skills is really the competence that you have to really get things done, complex things. And people skills is how well people relate to you and you relate to people, and how well people connect to you. If you look at the two leaders, if you look at Holness and Phillips, they are comparable in terms of conceptual skills. They can synthesize, they can articulate new ideas, and they can bring them together, they can pick them apart, and they can spout them to the public. Also, they are both task-oriented. I mean, Peter Phillips got a lot done when he was in national security, when he was in the Ministry of Finance, and so on. And as Prime Minister, Holness has articulated some big things that he wants to achieve. So we know that both of them have a task orientation, and they are both technically competent. So the difference now is people skills. In Westminster politics, where institutionally the voters converge around the party and the leader, the personal skills and the likability of a leader is very important. So the difference between the two leaders is in their people skills. Holness connects more with the people compared to Peter Phillips.
Mr. Holness also seems to have a greater connection with the country's youth than Dr. Phillips.
So Peter Phillips will articulate and explain. What Andrew Holness has done is to construct a political persona, right, that he uses. So a political persona is constructed by a politician, right? And he uses the persona as he wishes to be seen by the public, as opposed to who he or she really is. So the question then when we talk about persona is that Andrew Holness has constructed a political persona that is more effective in presenting himself as he wishes to be seen by the Jamaican public. If you look at him, how he uses social media, he's social media savvy compared to a Peter Phillips. Not just his age, he's using the media that young people uses, and so they'll see him as one of them, as one who is listening to them, as one who understands them. So he's more social media savvy, and he uses it to connect. But importantly about the political persona that he has constructed is the fact that he projects himself as being different from the JLP. So his campaign, in terms of social media, sets him apart from the Jamaica Labour Party. So it's not surprising to me that the moral failings of his ministers is not affecting him because of how he has constructed his persona as this leader who is competent and who is morally upright and who is serious, who wants to get big things done. The political persona of the leader of the opposition is not discernible, because remember, the persona is a mask that you construct as a political leader, that you project to the public as you want them to see you. I don't think he wants to be seen in the light that they have seen him or that they're experiencing him in. He doesn't want to be seen this way. According to the polls, in terms of approval ratings, he is behind.
You're watching Battleground 2020. When we return,
there are unexpected big developments that can change the political dynamic. It can happen, but I don't expect it. So it should be something like that would have to happen to put the government at a disadvantage.
welcome back to Battleground 2020. A key part of swaying voters is the ability to sell them a vision. Professor Charles shares his views on how both parties have performed in this area.
The PNP has not yet come up with a vision that once you hear PNP, you recall that vision. In the past, yes. But for example, if you say JLP and you ask what the vision is, you'll hear prosperity. It doesn't matter whether or not you think there's prosperity. The issue is, if you ask what the vision of the Jamaica Labour Party in general and Andrew Olness in particular, you'll hear prosperity. If you ask what is the vision of the People's National Party, you have to think for a little while to come up with something. I think they have not worked out what that particular vision should be. Yes, the party still says it's democratic socialist, but in terms of articulating democratic socialism in a way that people finds comfortable and remember easily rather, they have not been successful at this. So they have not created a vision about democratic socialism in this dispensation that the people finds attractive compared to the JLP. And I'm saying it this way because the PNP has a larger base and still has its base. The JLP has its base. But to win the election significantly, you're going to have to tap into new voters and to issue voters, in particular those who suffer from political apathy.
Don Anderson is seen by many as the most credible pollster in Jamaica. He says trends suggest that the JLP will be victorious, but insists that polls don't win elections. Getting out supporters on election day do.
Who wins the election, to a large extent, will depend on who gets their people out on election day. I'll tell you why I said that very quickly. In the 2016 election, between 2011 when the PNP won and 2016 when the election was held, 174,000 new people were enumerated, were registered to vote. Now, if you take off those who died and moved away, you have a little less, but 174,000 people were registered during that 5-year chunk under the PNP's watch. That doesn't mean that the PNP registered 174, but 174,000. I wanted to imagine that a significant number of them, if you're smart enough, would be PNP people because you want to stay in office. When you counted the votes at the end of the day, the JLP got 30,000 more than they got in 2011. The PNP got 30,000 less than they did in 2011. What does that tell you? That a significant percentage of the PNP people did not go out to vote in 2016, and they lost the election by 3,000 votes and 1 seat. That's a massive evaluation of what took place and why the PNP lost. There are other factors, didn't want to debate, using oldest house, different number of things.
He, however, argues that poll results can affect the attitudes and behaviors of voters.
In a close election, if the polls are saying, boy, one party leading by 2 percentage points, it galvanizes both teams. If the poll suggests that one party is leading by 20 percentage points, let's use that, right? What it does is galvanize the support and the enthusiasm of the party that's 20 percentage points ahead. But it can dissipate the support and the morale of the party that's 20 percentage points behind. Here's where leadership comes in. Because that's normal. If the data is saying, boy, I'm going to lose, then the supporters of that particular party might want to say, well, it doesn't make no sense to go vote, we'll lose anyway. And I've heard that. I've had experiences of that in the years that I've been polling. The party that seems to be far behind, if they're not careful and if they're weak-kneed, is going to bow down and stay and play dead, and they're going to lose even worse.
The renowned pollster adds that public perception of a party leader also plays a critical role in swaying voters.
The leader is very important. I've made reference to Patterson versus Seaga, Michael Manley versus Seaga. And what won those elections was the leader and the lineup behind the leader. So the leader is very important. We're getting to the stage where issues are becoming more important, but it is not the most important factor yet. In other words, you can present issues that are appealing to people, that resonate with people. It's not the most important factor yet, but we're becoming more issues conscious. Right now, it still depends on the leader and who is the candidate and who is the party. Because a lot of the times when we ask people, why are you going to vote for the JLP? Why are you going to vote for the PNP? These are traditionalists, and some have voted all the while, a significant percentage. Now, the thing to note, it takes us back to an earlier answer. The base for the PNP is larger than the base for the JLP has been. So when you look at the reasons for people voting for the PNP, they generally have a larger core support. In other words, more people say they vote for the PNP because they always vote for the PNP than those who say they always vote for the JLP, which is good and bad. It's good because you're probably confident of a chunk of voters. On the other hand, the fewer people who say that they're going to vote for the JLP because they're the JLP means that more people are probably issues conscious. So it gives you more opportunity to have a better message. If you're going to say, well, I always vote because I always vote, and come vote because I always vote, that's not strong enough.
Professor Charles notes that his election forecasting model has predicted a winner for the September 3 general election.
When we ran the model, the outcome is that the JLP is likely to win the upcoming general election. And then someone will say, okay, we understand economic developments. The government has not met all its targets, but there's a perception among some voters that they are okay, among some voters. But how do you explain the relatively high homicide rate during the period of emergency and the zones of special operation and the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic? We still have relatively high homicides, what we tend to find in Jamaica is that tough policing measures are very popular. So although the homicide rate is increasing or is relatively high, because of the ZOSOs and the period of emergency, the government is still popular. People find these things attractive because they are tough and they feel that they will achieve some measure of success. It was the same thing in 1976. The state of emergency in 1976 was very popular. Why? Because the people liked it. They felt it was going to bring the political violence in the country under control. So although homicide rate is relatively high, the measures that have been put in place, the people find attractive. So it's not whether they are working or not. The important thing is that the people find these measures attractive and they like them.
The political and social psychologist points out that while a party can be popular under the first-past-the-post rule of determining seats in the Westminster system, the important thing is how that popularity among voters is distributed across the 63 seats. In other words, a party can get the most votes overall but still lose the election because it won less seats than its competitor. There are other factors that could impact the election outcome.
For the Prime Minister, it has to be a black swan. A big, unexpected, a momentous development that no one was expecting, that you have never experienced before in political life, that can change it. And I use the term black swan because before the Europeans went to Australia, they thought all swans were white. When they went to Australia, they saw a black swan. So the black swan use here is saying that despite stability, despite where you are, sometimes there are unexpected big developments that can change the political dynamic. It can happen, but I don't expect it. So it should be something like that would have to happen to put the government at a disadvantage. In relation to Peter Phillips, what could change the political dynamic? The PNP would have to converge in a very effective way around the leader, and they would have to articulate policies that are big and transformative, that people feel will be impactful, and they have to convince not just their base, but a large chunk of the apathetic voters and the issue voters.
You're watching Battleground 2020. Coming up,
young people like myself, we're very involved. We're youth advocates, youth leaders, whatever the term that we like to use to describe ourselves. But our seat at the table is largely tokenistic.
welcome back to Battleground 2020. Both the JLP and the PNP have been on the hunt to secure the youth vote. Christina Williams is a youth advocate and immediate past president of the Guild of Students at the University of the West Indies, Mona. She underscores that whoever gets elected on September 3 should take more time to listen to the concerns of the youth.
Their youth perspectives are affected or influenced by a number of different reasons based on what I have encountered. And it's about, one, how informed our young people are. And it's more than just book learning, quote unquote. Persons are doing political science here at UWI Mona or other universities, but it's more about an appreciation for the political landscape in a reality sense. So if young people are exposed in that regard, you're seeing where they're more vocal. You may see them on social media, particularly Twitter, getting very involved. You may see them atting their political leaders. I have seen my peers do that. But I think a larger majority of young people are not so decided as much. They may comment, they may say something on social media or in groups, but to actually say young people are actually going to go out and vote, I think I'm yet to see that.
Her views are fully supported by university lecturer Dr. Kadamawe Knife. He notes that the world has gone digital and young people are more equipped than older persons to work in the emerging industries. The director of the Center for Entrepreneurship Thinking and Practice at the University of the West Indies, Mona, says the next administration must be ready to put Jamaica's progress and prosperity firmly in the hands of the youth.
So what you have then is an absence of young people who understand the processes that are relevant now, being a part of the decision-making processes. And remember, Jamaica, out of more Caribbean territories, have the better, we call ICT infrastructure, It's the best ICT infrastructure across the Caribbean in Jamaica. But remember that the youth and brain are so advanced that even though we might have the best structure in the region, it is not adequate enough to facilitate what these youths actually want. So if we want to do the right thing, the first thing we have to do is actually listen to what these young people are saying. Remember, the reality that you build a country not for yourself, because you're soon dead, you build a country for your children, and them come. So if you're not listening to them, you don't know what to do. And as I say, and listening is not just the words. Look at them behavior.
The university lecturer notes that Jamaicans are doomed to fail if every citizen is not given a level play field of opportunities in this new decade.
Some people already have a lot of resources. It is easy for them to access more resources, while those who do have no resources will make it more difficult. You want to shift around that thing. I'm not busy near your friend, but all I'm saying, even if you want to leach in land, make sure so when any people want land, them don't have no hassle, just as all leaching don't have no hassle. Until you start to get the dynamic in that kind of way, you're going to continue to have problems, and people who are not economically empowered are not socially nor politically empowered. No matter what people want to say, you have to have a certain amount of resources. That don't mean money, but if you have resources, if you want to effect changes, and as we have so much what you call undeveloped spaces in Jamaica. Land is a resource, but you don't have the equipment to utilize the land. It remains undeveloped. And in some cases, we look at the resources badly, so the development becomes a kind of underdevelopment. So is the equity of access to resources, and how do we truly empower people on the ground to generate economics and therefore be in a position to deliver them own what we call social and political capital to make changes in the community.
Many economists and financial gurus have predicted major setbacks for Jamaica's economy in the coming months. It's a major fear for many, including O.J. Adlam, an undecided voter.
COVID most definitely will not be ending for now, especially with our now Jamaican context of what's really happening. Post our elections, I'm anticipating our leaders for us to the youth have a wider, not just the youth, but everyone in the nation have a wider access to things that are needed now. We realize that jobs are not changing, and so there are more needs for online jobs in comparison to face-to-face jobs, and we need to now establish protocols and our guideline that really guides us as to what we really do. We have COVID-19 is something that is the first happening to us, and with that happening to us, we would not necessarily have guidelines or policies or protocols to really observe, and so we want to see some of those rolling out. We want to see more involvement of these, whoever should win, more involvement within the living of our citizens, not just, oh, I can give you some money to vote, or you can come to my constituent office and have a roadwork, but more so of how we bridge a gap between as a politician and as a citizen growing up, or the livelihood of persons generally.
But Ajay's concerns seem to cut even deeper. He is among a group of young Jamaicans who are thoroughly disgusted by episodes of corruption involving the two parties, whether it was Trafigura, NetServe, or the Cuban light bulb under the PNP, or Petrojam, Nasol, and CMU under the JLP.
I would love to see the day when our politicians now assume the responsibilities of catering to our people, the needs and the wants of our people, and also when they are now be held accountable for their actions. A typical example, should someone, a regular Jamaican, a regular citizen, should commit a particular crime and him or her is prosecuted, the same should be for these persons who are leading the country.
It's an issue that civil society groups want to be addressed immediately.
I'm very concerned about corruption in Jamaica. I'm very concerned about corruption generally. I think Jamaica has a far way to go in terms of structurally finding ways to ensure that our resources are used for what it ought to be, and that those persons who breach our trust are punished severely. I think overall what has been happening is that we have been lax, and this laxity is across political administrations, and even more than that, it is also within a structure that our society either has facilitated or just allowed to happen. So we'll put three things in place. One, if there is more public will, i.e. more people demanding accountability. Two, if the institutions and structures are in place, and these institutions and structures are peopled by persons with integrity and with that structural leadership, then we will have a difference in Jamaica. So that's what you're trying to do. Ensure that people are demanding that the government and that the people do their jobs, and ensure that our resources are used better. So if that happens, we'll have a better Jamaica.
Then the whole business of strengthening our systems of accountability so that the waste that we see in government and the apparent possible instances of corruption, and I'm framing it just the way I framed it, because one doesn't know if corruption has occurred until it is proven, but things certainly don't appear to be kosher. But if you take a corruption out of it, the billions that are wasted are phenomenal, mind-boggling. So how will we, what's our government's intention for plugging the loopholes in the existing policies, the existing laws, the existing regulations?
If my memory serves me correctly, my colleague posters were reflecting on their recall of what the poll numbers have been like over the years in relation during periods of corruption. And they have concluded that corruption has minimal impact on electoral fortunes. Corruption doesn't matter to hardcore political supporters. The parties, once they mobilize, are going to bring out those supporters. Corruption doesn't matter to them. But to make a blanket statement that corruption doesn't matter is off, because corruption is one of the reasons why we have a low voter turnout and we have a high rate of political apathy in the country.
We have a paternal culture. But over time, what you have found is that people have been saying that there needs to be a break from this paternal culture, where there is a culture of governance, where our resources are actually spread not for some political largesse, but rather for the work of the people. And I'm saying that there has to be some form of social construct around that. And this is not some far-fetched thing. The Caribbean has always been a forward-looking set of people. What we're saying is that those persons who are in power now and are feeling like they have a sway over what is happening, and I want to remind them, and when I use those in power, I'm talking about both political parties as they are, or as they have operated. What you want to say is that the political system as it is now has certain structural weaknesses that need to be rectified. And if we rectify them, we will have a better Jamaica that works for all Jamaicans.
So many of our people are dependent upon the status quo for their survival. They're dependent upon their member of parliament, and that dependence is fostered and nurtured. There are communities where when community members try to do for themselves, try to organize things that they know need to happen, in some communities that's squelched, that's seriously undermined by the political representatives, and I say that without fear of contradiction. As well, many of our people are dependent upon political leaders for everything from birth till death, right? That dependence that has been fostered and nurtured and encouraged has worked against us, and is something that we're going to have to work hard at breaking that stranglehold that the politics has over our people for their survival. And let's not make a mistake. This is not just about poor Jamaicans. This is also about our private sector that depends upon government contracts and so stays quiet because people don't want to be victimized. They don't want to be done out of a contract. So in many, many ways, we are silenced. Many people are silenced.
You're watching Battleground 2020. Coming up,
If you won that battleground seat as an opposing party by 100 votes, you're very vulnerable.
welcome back to Battleground 2020. In 2016, the JLP beat the PNP by a one-seat margin to win the general election 32 seats to 31. The JLP increased its tally by 2 additional seats in subsequent by-elections in 2 battleground seats, St. Mary Southeast and Portland Eastern. As noted earlier, many of the experts have argued that the fate of the parties at the polls rests with their ability to get out their voters on election day. A key part of beating their opponents is to also win the battleground seats. These include the hotly contested St. Andrew Eastern constituency.
Battleground seats are seats that in our kind of environment would be seats that are won by probably 100 votes or less in the previous election. It's difficult. It depends on which party is in power, which party is ahead in that battleground seat. Because if you are in opposition and you are ahead in that battleground seat by 100. In other words, if you won that battleground seat as an opposing party by 100 votes, you're very vulnerable.
Traditional seats, over time, can become marginal seats like East Portland, where the PNP won it for several elections. I never call it at any time a PNP seat because of the margin of victories across elections. But using that example, traditional seats can become marginal seats. And the marginals are very interesting. If the smaller the margin, the more important the seat is to the competing political parties. So a seat like Eastern St. Andrew, Favour Williams for the JLP and Venetia Phillips for the People's National Party. This is a very important marginal in the sense that the margin of victory tends to be one of the smallest across all marginals in the country. And the reason is you do have pockets of inner city communities where hardcore supporters can battle it out, but we also have middle class and high income communities throughout the constituency. So the space to battle is small. And so this seat is always very interesting, given the small margin of victory. And I'm saying Eastern St. Andrew is one that if you want to understand how the election is going, look at Eastern St. Andrew.
I've focused on the physical infrastructure of communities to help to ensure that the basics are in place in terms of roadworks, water network, light utility regularization within communities. And across the constituency, there would have been many communities that would have benefited from the focus that I've had on infrastructure. Additionally, training, job training, helping persons to find opportunities has been a focus as well. And I've done this by beginning a program of ensuring that community centers, or as we call them, access points in communities are upgraded so that we can put in computers into those centers.
I have been able as councillor at first instance to achieve, infrastructurally, talk about the physical, because I think that's my biggest achievement yet. I've done some 29 roads in the Papine division. I don't know that I'm rivaled even by members of parliament who would have gotten much more in terms of resources. You now have to look at a new and improved Papine market, which for many, many years has been quite topical because it is so important to the life of this constituency. I have worked on the Papine Park. Not many people remember what that park used to look like when it was dirty, old, dusty, and blue. But you have a park that persons can actually sit in, because these are some of the basic things that a wholesome constituency need. I was instrumental in getting roads and lanes paved right here in the Mona division.
August Town. There's a big plan what is called the University Town, Get it in our brain, the University Town. And there's a plan for what is called the Papine Tourism Development Program, which stretches from August Town straight up into the hills of St. Andrew in both Juliet Oldest constituency and Juliet Cuthbert constituency now. So you find us stabilizing those places, getting those places organized is extremely important. Papine is the biggest university town in the Caribbean again. You have UWI, you have UTEC, you have Hart NTA, you have an ex-training place right around that. I can't remember the name of the place. But 4 major training institutions where every day you have more than 50,000 people passing through the Papine town. You alone have 20,000 people coming through every day. So whether them is Battleground seat or not, I am saying it's a very important space to ensure that it's stabilized because of what development plans are. Now if you talk about the eastern part of the island, whether it's Portland or St. Thomas, remember that every ship that comes into Kingston Harbour comes through here, the eastern part of the island. And when the logistics space is established, and you have hundreds of ships coming in and you cannot come into Kingston, where do you think I'm going to stay? You have to stay out by St. Thomas. That's why the plans were to go and build up this big space in St. Thomas, that when those ships dock out there, them can come onshore. So it's getting stability and development in those places extremely important as well.
A fierce battle is also shaping up in the St. Catherine East Central Battleground seat between Orlando Terrelong and Raymond Price. Come September 3, their supporters will decide who wins and who is forced to go back to the drawing board.
Raymond Price, yeah, man, I want to support him and see how the country run and how he's doing things. I'm set it. Him is the right one, the right choice, and the price we make. Make you feel more comfortable, all right.
We don't want no more PNP government. What we want to say, Andrew Wolney straight and Terradon straight all the while.
In analyzing 2020 so far, it is evident that the world will never be the same again. People are unsure about what's on the horizon. Many argue that what is clear is that Jamaica must ready itself to be in a position to deal with it in the best possible way. The experts believe the people will have to find ways to empower themselves so they can play a greater role in governance as well as economic and social development.
We're facing a very, very, very perilous moment in time globally. It is going to be very difficult for the next year or two. And what we need for governance are people who are willing to speak the truth. People who are willing to say to the population, this is how difficult it's going to get. These are our ideas for how we're going to get us through it. And so setting out a set of credible, relevant ideas for the time.
There are certain laws that give too much forbearing power to the ministers. There is limited checks and balances or active checks and balances that are happening. There is some cultural and structural weaknesses that allow individuals to have sway over how resources are shared. You can use the example, the CDF funds. You can use all the other examples of where monies are are passed through the hands of the elected leaders rather than through systems that allow for accountability. Then you also have a cultural space where these elected officials think that they have control over things. So there's that on the political side. There's also on the institutional side where the Integrity Commission, MOCA, and other MOCA, INDICOM, the political ombudsman, and all the other administrative or accountability portals or programs are not either supported enough in terms of resources or either human resourced enough for them to be able to do their jobs well. So you can use this example of the Integrity Commission. One can make the point that the Integrity Commission right now is hamstrung because it is not adequately resourced, nor is it adequately supported. The other thing you can say is that MOCA by itself is not right now independent, and this can be done through simple moves. We can say the Auditor General and their work needs to be supported further. So these are things that need to be done for us to move forward.
It's time we move past the politics in our way and focus on the development. I mean, I tell a man who's at the PNP or GLP, so he must vote PNP, because you know people go through them experience as them pick them side. But me I say, Virgin, Rastafari not pick no side. And that's why I'm not doing no politics. Because I say if you choose PNP, like you're going to be anti-GLP. And that don't work. Development don't work them way there. The people who are planning for grow the country for, as you, them not PNP or GLP, when them come from PNP or GLP, come to them on the road and sit at the bus stop. I can't say that PNP or GLP, but I know say, are you on the road say I must do something to country new development. And we have to have that kind of focus. But I still now tell a man say he must go vote for him party because no people have reasons why they go vote for PNP and why they go vote for GLP, and not just because of today. It's also historical. Means them grandparents and the mother, and now him and him have real reasons why they might not like the PNP or the GLP. And also real reasons why they might like the PNP and the GLP. But ultimately I say, in PNP and GLP, P mean people. A P for mean people. And so they win or lose, no, so you still are responsible to serve the people them, whether them a PNP or GLP or no at all, because the country can't move without people.
You've been watching Battleground 2020. If you choose to vote, please do so in a peaceful, orderly, and safe way. I'm Janella Precious. As we say in Jamaica, walk good.